So I know that you met like Ryan Petersen really early on, and you guys together, I believe, set it up so that you and his referral codes were ranking, Uber referral codes were ranking on Google. How did you do this?
Yeah. So at the time, I don't know if there were rules against it or not, but you would get a decent amount of money for referring somebody to Uber.
$15 or something.
Yeah, exactly. When they were getting started. And so we would just buy AdWords against our referral code. And first of all, it was fun because you got to learn AdWords, and then it made your Uber rides really cheap. And so it was a fun little hack. Now, ultimately I got caught. I was in India traveling, and I had an issue with payments. And I contacted customer support of Uber, and they were like, this is very strange. Why do you have I think it was like $10,000 of Uber credit in your account? And they actually banned my account.
Hello, I'm Ty Morse. This is my conversation with Sheel Mohnot, the founder of Businessman, Innovative Auctions, and Better Tomorrow Ventures. I hope you enjoy. Let's start with your parents.
Okay.
What were your parents and family like?
Cool. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and to immigrant parents from India. My dad came over in 1974 for his master's. He eventually did a PhD in chemical engineering. And my dad grew up very poor in India. He grew up in a village, basically. His dad died when he was 3. They really had no money. They all started working at a young age. And he was very lucky in that in high school, he had a principal at his school that said, hey, you're really talented. I want to get you out of this village. And so he ended up, this guy helped him get a scholarship to a better school in a nearby village. And the school he was in was like a government school, but he ended up going to a better school somewhere else. And then from there ended up applying to IIT, IIT Bombay, which was the best college in India. And at the time, chemical engineering was the top thing that you could study. And he was very fortunate that he got out of the village and into this better high school and then into IIT. But he did not necessarily want to come to America. But
really? Why not?
I think, he was just close to his family. He had a couple of brothers that were sick, and he wanted to stay back for them. But at some point, so he was working in India for a couple of years after college. And then at some point, this guy a year ahead of him in college, who they would study together, said, hey, I'm studying at this place. It was in Kansas State. And I spoke to my professors here. They know that you were a great student and want to offer you a scholarship to come out here, and they'll pay you a stipend. And so my dad did the math and said, you know what, even with my little stipend that I'm getting at Kansas State, I'm going to save more money than I'm making in India. So I'll be able to send more money back to my family in India. So he came over to Manhattan, Kansas. He had never been on a plane before and had taken, a plane with 5 hops to get over here. While he had a stipend from the university, he had to have money just to come to America, to pay for the plane ticket. And then at the time, you needed to prove that you could live in America. So you needed to have $300. So he had to raise the money to get to America. And he did basically a crowdfunding campaign where he wrote letters to everyone in the community, and collectively they put together the money for my dad to travel to America.
Do you have context around how much that $300 cost in rupees at the time?
I don't, but it was just a lot. Oh, I do actually, because his salary at the time was around $20 a month. So it was more,
a lot.
It was more than a full year of salary for him. And then he had to raise the money for the flight and everything. So it was a big deal. Raised the money. And then actually, so he's a university student doing his master's in Kansas, and he needs to figure out a way to pay it back. And the stipend, doesn't go as far as he thinks it's going to go. Things in America are very expensive relative to India. So he actually starts selling encyclopedias door to door. And he, and you can imagine this is like a short Indian man, I think with a mustache at the time, heavy accent. And he just starts selling encyclopedias door to door. And the territory he gets, this is in the summertime, the territory he gets is the South. So he's selling encyclopedias in like Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, literally door to door. And he actually is he turns out to be a very good encyclopedia salesman. And he's so good that he wins an award, wins this award from Ronald Reagan.
He got an award from Ronald Reagan?
Yeah. So before Ronald Reagan was president,
okay.
But he got this award for being the best encyclopedia seller, which I don't really understand why Ronald Reagan is involved at all. But we have this photo of him giving an award to my dad for being the best encyclopedia seller that year. And actually he made enough money selling the encyclopedias that he was able to buy a condo in India for his brother. And it was like a one room condo that he bought with his earnings that summer. And that place is still where my family lives in India.
Really?
It's still that one room.
Has this been like 35 or 40 years?
More than that.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy. It's been, I guess like 45 years.
45 years.
Yeah, almost 50. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah. So you mentioned on another podcast that you started multiple like small businesses or something when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Can you talk about those?
Yeah, I was always intrigued by a business and wanting to do something. So, it started by, my dad owned a very small apartment building, and I like made a deal with my dad to collect the money from the washing machine. I had to do it on a regular basis. Because it was a coin-operated washing machine. Mm-hmm. Along the way, I did a bunch of other things. I was a DJ. So I used to, when I was in high school and college and a little bit after, I would DJ Indian weddings was my specialty. And I had the setup, and it was a really fun time. I enjoyed it. What else? I would fix computers. Mm-hmm. So go around the neighborhood, and I would, put in the mail boxes like, I can fix your computer. I really didn't know what I was doing. And I'm pretty sure sometimes I made the computer worse, but it was a business I had for a time. So I was always trying to do stuff. After college, there was a time my headphones broke. And they were the Apple AirPods that just come out. I'd gotten them as a gift from work, actually, and my headphones broke. So I needed a new pair. The Apple store at that time wasn't selling it. So I actually decided to go to China and find replacement Apple headphones. And so at the time, the iPod mini had come out in 4 different colors. So I had made the same exact headphones in colors matching the iPod mini, and sold those online, and learned a lot about marketing and content marketing, all that kind of stuff at the time. It's pretty cool, fun little project.
How much did you end up making from all of those?
Yeah, good question. So I remember, I think the first run was 1,000 headphones. The second one was 10,000. So we bought 11,000 headphones, and they were like 80 cents a piece. And then we sold them online for $15 or $20 a piece. But a lot, there was expense, marketing was expensive. So I don't know how much I netted, but in the end I sold a bunch of them for like $6 wholesale. So, it was a fun little side business that helped me learn a lot about how to market on the internet.
That's wild. And what year was this?
This is 2004.
Okay, that's wild. So like Shopify was not a thing. How did you end up like building the site to sell the stuff online?
That's a great question. Shopify was not a thing, but there were other shopping cart softwares out there that we used.
Wasn't Paul Graham's?
Paul Graham's thing was there, but that's not what we used. I don't remember the one we used. I remember several of them that we tried. Volusion was one. There were a few others. I don't remember what we ended up trying. And then we did end up having like a third party. So originally the headphones came to my house and I was shipping them. And then ultimately we had like a third party that they would ship to, and we were paying them some, cents per month per item, stuff like that.
That's fun. So skipping forward, I think to like 2007, 2008, you ended up like working with Kiva.
Yeah.
And you were living on like 2,000 rupees a month.
That's right.
How did this happen?
Yeah. So it actually started 2006, 7. So 2006 is when I moved out there. And there was this fellowship called Indie Corps. Indie Corps was like the Peace Corps, but for India. India had kicked out the Peace Corps in the late 70s, and Indira Gandhi kicked them out. Long story.
Okay.
And this guy wanted to start a new version for Indians who didn't grow up in India to move back to India and sort of like give back to India. And the idea was you'd spend a year in service of India doing some project. And my project was in microfinance and with Kiva. And so Kiva, for those who don't know, kiva.org is a website where you can make a loan to an individual in the developing world for the sake of alleviating poverty. And the goal is that you help them with their business. This money that you give them is catalytic. So as an example, some of the earliest Kiva borrowers were farmers. And if you give a farmer an irrigation pump, might cost a couple $100, but could make a huge difference. And they could actually pay you back that money just in 1 year's difference in crops. So that was the original idea. And the idea was we can facilitate all of this through the internet, where somebody can write the story of that farmer on the internet in Ghana, and somebody here in the United States will read that and be compelled to make a donation.
Yeah.
Not a donation, a loan to that person just using their credit card. So that's how it went. Ultimately, has been super successful over time. And I moved to India sort of with Indie Corps with the idea that I would work on a Kiva project. And the idea was, how do we get Kiva into India? And we had to find projects on the ground these microfinance institutions were running, and find the right borrowers, teach them how to use the system and all that kind of stuff. But I'd say, while I went in service of India is what I thought. I thought like, I'm going to help India. It's going to be great. And I think like really I provided, limited to no value to India, but it was super valuable to me.
Why do you think that you didn't provide any value?
I think, look, like, on the margins, maybe we helped some people, but I think the much more powerful thing was what I got out of it. So, sort of like ended up being much more selfish than I thought, which was like, I changed as a person a lot. And I realized what I value in life, what I love doing, how I have fun. I just sort of like really grew up that year, earning not very much money, working in a foreign country. I realized like, I don't need a ton of money to be happy. I realized helping people is something that I want to be part of my life. And I realized that I just love emerging markets. And so all those things, and the other thing I learned was I was writing during that time. I had a blog, and the blog ended up getting picked up by some other more prominent blogs, and I ended up having a lot of readers. And I really enjoyed that. I loved writing. Not particularly good at it, but I enjoyed it. And I kind of stopped for a very long time. Only recently in the past 5 years or so, I've gotten pretty active on Twitter. So I'm writing again, although not really writing in the same way, not writing the long form content that I was before.
Was there any kind of like serendipity that came out of you writing that to all of those people?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I actually have friends to this day that I met through my blog. 2 very good friends of mine today. I met because they started reading my blog and commenting, and now we're sort of like in-person friends, travel to see each other, all that kind of stuff. And actually one of them ended up doing the Indie Core program because he was reading my blog. So
really?
Yeah, it was super, super great.
That's wild. And you did like a stint at Intel Capital, I think, when you got back, and you said that you were searching like Slovenia or something for a company, and you actually found one that you were interested in, but you didn't invest in it. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So this was during business school. I did a project with Intel Capital. It was my first exposure to venture capital. And it was a great project. They gave us money and they said, go to the former Yugoslavian countries and explore the market, figure out if we should be investing there. And so, I spent a few weeks traveling in Slovenia and Croatia and meeting with companies. And I was, very young, but really got to meet a lot of folks in those countries. The one company that I had recommended was a company called Zementa. And what they did was, if you had a blog, again, we're talking about blogs a lot. Blogs were a lot more popular back then than they are today. But if you had a blog, they suggested related blogs and mixed in ads into your blog. And it was a cool company. They were based in Ljubljana, Slovenia at the time. I think they ultimately moved and ultimately raised more money from, I think, Fred Wilson and others. And so it was a good company. We didn't end up investing in it, but it was a very good company.
Why do you think they didn't end up investing?
I don't think it was, I guess it was like a little bit off thesis for them. And so they decided not to.
Yeah. Did you have anyone that was like a big influence in your early career?
Yeah. So there's this guy, CK Prahalad. He wrote a book. He wrote a book in the 80s called The Core Competence of the Firm. Then he wrote a book called The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. And it was all about how you could make money and help people at the bottom of the pyramid. And he coined that term, bottom of the pyramid. And I got to work with him pretty closely in business school. We wrote some cases together. We were writing a lot more. He unfortunately passed away, but he really sort of gave me a few pieces of advice, and we actually already talked about them. So it was work on hard problems, work in emerging markets where they need it, and write about it. And so those were his like 3 pearls of wisdom. And, I can't say I'm doing all of them the way that he did or the way he might have wanted, but in my own little way, I think I'm doing some of those things.
Yeah. What was the like initial idea for FeeFighters, and why did you start that company?
Okay. So FeeFighters, the backstory is, me and actually like the CEO of FeeFighters, Sean, who's still a very close friend, he had started a satellite radio company where he was selling satellite radios, like the actual like
literal
product.
Nice.
Yeah. And I had that headphone company, and so we had experiences with credit card processing, and we had both gotten ripped off on credit card processing. And Sean had actually realized that he got ripped off on credit card processing more than the entire profit he made in his first year running his company.
Gosh. Wow.
And so he went super deep into learning about credit card processing, and it's a complicated thing. There's multiple folks. There's the processor, there's the data, there's the flow of money. And he just went super deep on it and was like, hey, the best way to get a great price is to have a reverse auction where the processors bid down on your business. And so we had this marketplace for payments, and you came in as a merchant, gave us a few pieces of information, and the processors bid through our marketplace for your business. But it wasn't like they had to do a bid for each one. It was like they had already inserted their algorithm and the bid came back. So it was kind of like searching for a flight on Kayak.
Yep.
And the business was good, but what happened was it became too good for the merchants. Because our business model was we took 50% of the gross profit from that processor, the sale that they made for you, as basically like a customer generation fee.
Yep.
But the marketplace became so efficient that there was very little gross margin. So we said, okay, what we're going to do is insert ourselves into the marketplace. So we inserted ourselves into the marketplace and built a payment processor and a payment gateway and put them together. And the product was called Samurai. And a payment processor and a payment gateway is actually like very similar to what Stripe is. And we launched around the same time as Stripe. And actually the Stripe guys, we'd done calls with the Stripe guys about being on our marketplace. They had used our marketplace, read our blog, all sorts of stuff. But when we launched ours, sort of around that time, we were raising a Series A, and we got a call from Groupon. We were based in Chicago. Groupon was in Chicago. They said, "Hey, look, we're looking to build out this business.
Yep.
Maybe we can join forces." And we did. We said, it took a few months of convincing, but ultimately we said, yeah, let's do this. And we joined Groupon and built out merchant products at Groupon. Never became what we could have been. Not to say that we would be anything close to what Stripe is. They probably would have eaten our lunch, but who knows? It was a wild time, and we also got to see the crazy heights and fall of Groupon in a relatively short time.
Yeah. Well, okay. I want to go on to that, but what was it like meeting Patrick and John that early in like 2009, early 10?
So it's probably a little bit later. So we were on the phone with them probably 2010 or 2011. And then I don't think I'd met them in person until 2012. And it was clear that, they had a very strong vision and knew what initially it wasn't clear. Like they weren't sure what they were doing. I think they were experimenting around. And then when I finally met them, like they were super sharp. I think we spent a bunch of time together. Not too far from here actually was their first office. And they were super clear. I don't think I would have envisioned that it would become a $50+ billion company. I never would have seen that coming, but they're super sharp. And I think they went into a space that they dominated very quickly. They became seen as the winner in Silicon Valley relatively early. And it has played out quite well for them. And there wasn't a lot of competition. Braintree got acquired by PayPal relatively early on in their journey. Adyen, international player, wasn't competing head to head for quite a while. So they had the ability to charge a lot and still be the CTO's choice. I think the big change that they brought was they made the choice of payment processing a technical one rather than a financial one. And it has served them super well.
Yeah. What was so after Groupon acquired you, I've heard a lot of startup founders talk about like remorse after an acquisition.
Yeah.
Was there any of that?
For sure. I definitely wasn't sure that they were who we wanted to get acquired by. And, we had fights amongst our team about it. But I can say looking back, even though Groupon did what it did and it didn't become a household name, like, we could have gotten acquired by a Google or a PayPal or something that would have looked better on our resume. But Groupon was in our backyard. We didn't have to move. And so I think looking back, Groupon gave me an opportunity.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to say I was an exited founder, and it opened up all sorts of doors. I started angel investing, which I really loved. And then I went on to start another company. And after that exit, I knew I wanted to do this full time, to be an investor, and it's been great.
Yeah.
So Groupon, while it wasn't the ideal acquirer, I learned a lot through that process.
And it gave you a bunch of optionality to do other stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I know that you met Ryan Petersen really early on, and you guys together, I believe, set it up so that you and his referral codes were ranking, Uber referral codes were ranking on Google. How did you do this?
Yeah. So at the time, I don't know if there were rules against it or not, but you would get a decent amount of money for referring somebody to Uber.
$15 or something.
Yeah, exactly. When they were getting started. And so we would just buy AdWords against our referral code. And you could, first of all, it was fun because you got to learn AdWords, and then it made your Uber rides really cheap. So, you're getting Ubers for, I don't know, 30% the cost, because we had,
so many
that $15 referral we were paying, I don't know, $3 to $5 for. And so it was a fun little hack. Now, ultimately I got caught. I was in India traveling, and I had an issue with payments, and I contacted customer support of Uber, and they were like, "This is very strange. Why do you have I think it was $10,000 of Uber credit in your account?" And they actually banned my account. And I actually couldn't use any of those credit cards anymore. Unfortunately, actually had two phone numbers, so I was able to use the other phone number to start a new Uber account.
That's wild. Why do you think they banned you? I would imagine Travis should get on the phone with you and start talking with you about how you did it.
I know. No, yeah, they went for the ban, and I was unable to contact them. They were it was
really
bad. Yeah.
Oh, geez. Okay, so how did you end up you did this with, I believe, with Ryan Petersen? How did you end up meeting Ryan Petersen?
Yeah, I met him, I think, at a party. Oh no, actually, I met him at a party through a friend, and then we kind of pretty quickly hit it off. We had a lot in common, kind of these hacky things. And then I told him look, when you start a company, I'm going to be your first investor. And, was fortunate that he started Flexport and let me be an investor. And I brought in some friends, and it's been a great journey.
Do you have any stories from Flexport's early years in which you helped them or anything like that?
Yeah, I think they I don't want to say that I don't want to take any credit for Flexport, but I'll say I think they called me a few times, especially when they were setting up a lending product. They were like, "Hey, we want to understand how to do this. Where do we get debt from? How does this whole thing work?" And I had some experience that was relevant there. And then I think I helped with some early hires, stuff like that. But just found, I think again, it was a case where I probably got more out of it than they got out of me.
So you went on after, actually, let's talk about the Groupon situation from 2012 to 2014. How did that, what was that like?
So it was interesting. So it felt like when I joined, we were on top of the world. So when they announced the acquisition of my company, which was not a huge acquisition, the stock went up by $600 million. And it was just like, people were so bullish on Groupon at that moment. And I had my doubts, but you know, it was a crazy time. Joined then. They had a couple bad quarters. Ultimately, there was an attempted boardroom coup, and then there was a boardroom coup. Andrew Mason, the CEO, was let go. And that was in February 2013, so less than a year after we joined. And then Eric took over as CEO. It was a big change in everything. It became like, Eric is kind of more of a private equity guy, kind of ran that way, was less fun to work at. I did work with him, but you know, I knew it wasn't the long-term place for me, and started working on other stuff, sort of thinking about what's next fairly quickly after Andrew left.
Yeah. Did you have any situation, like did you have any interaction with Andrew on like a relative? Okay. What was he like?
Super nice, humble, funny guy. Wanted to do what was right for the company. I think there was a business model challenge, that, and probably it was just overhyped at the time, and there were a lot of copycats, and it was just a tough business. And maybe if he was still at the helm or had more time, it would have turned into something better than what it did, which is, you know, when's the last time you heard of Groupon? But yeah, that's life.
Yeah. So after that, you started, I believe you just like almost immediately after you left Groupon, like started Innovative Auctions.
Yep.
What was the idea origination behind that? Like, I imagine that wasn't a problem that you just like experience on a daily basis.
No.
So
yeah,
counter market fit. Anyway.
Yeah. So one of my close friends is like a expert in auctions, and this governing body, the Internet Names, which is called ICANN, Internet Corporation for Assigning Names and Numbers. It was originally part of the U.S. government, Department of Commerce, hence .com, and then it became an internationally governed nonprofit. And they're the ones who give out domain names, and they give them out to what are called registries that manage a particular TLD, which is called a top level domain. So .com is managed by the registry VeriSign. And there are so many others. And they said in 2012, you could apply for your own .whatever. What would you apply for if you could apply for .something?
.relentless.
.relentless. Okay. It's a long one, but okay, let's go with .relentless. And then you'd be able to sell everything .relentless. So you'd be able to sell Sheel .relentless, you know, whatever. Amazon .relentless. So if you were the only one that applied, you got it. And you had to pay $285,000 to apply. But if multiple parties applied, let's say you, me, and Brian all applied for .relentless, then you had to figure it out. And ICANN said, you guys figured it out amongst yourselves, the three of you. And when two of you have dropped out, the third one gets it. Or if you guys can't figure it out, at some way later date, ICANN will help you sort it out. So we decided to create an auction that would help sort it out between these three parties. And we went to this meeting and started talking to people. And the people involved aren't like you, me, and Brian. They're like Amazon, Microsoft, this billionaire in the Cayman Islands, these guys who raised $100 million seed round just to do this. Big ideas, big companies, cash rich. So we went to these folks and said, how are you going to sort this out? And they said, we're going to get into a room and negotiate. And I said, well, do you want to negotiate with Google? It seems like they might be better at negotiating, and they have a lot of money. So ultimately, we created this auction. The way the auction worked was an auction where the sellers get paid. So what does that mean? What's your willingness to pay for .relentless?
Depends on how much cash I have. Not very much right now, but a lot at some point.
Let's say you were
$1 million.
$1 million. Let's say $1 million. All right. So your willingness to pay is $1 million. My willingness to pay, let's say, is $8 million. And Brian's willingness to pay is actually $9 million. So in our auction, it was a timed auction. So every 20 minutes, the price would go up. And at $1 million, you're out. At $8 million, I'm out. And then when I'm out, Brian gets it. Brian wins the auction and he pays $8 million. But the unique part of the auction, so that's not that unique. The unique part of the auction is that the sellers get paid. So because the two of us are withdrawing our application, we each get $4 million to withdraw our application. So it's an interesting model where the winner pays, the sellers get paid. So there's really no loser.
It's kind of a win-win-win situation.
Win-win situation. And so we created this auction. It became super popular and we settled most of the contention sets that ICANN had. And it was a really, really cool business. Went way better than we expected.
How do you market a business like this?
So there were about 200 contention sets, and it was public information who all the parties were. Like you were able to reach them in some way. Like if you dug through all the paperwork, you were able to find their address or email address or something. And so we were able to get in touch with most of them, but not all. And for each contention set to work, we needed every party involved.
Participate.
So there were some times where it was complicated. It might be worth me flying to a different country to try to find somebody. There was one that was in Gibraltar, and it was a really critical one for us to get. And I almost was getting on a plane and I was just going to go to Gibraltar and find these people. But ultimately, they would have these conferences every quarter, and I'd be going to these conferences. And ultimately, I was memorizing the face of everybody I needed to get in touch with. And ultimately, I saw this guy that I needed to get in touch with from Gibraltar. And I saw that he had gone outside to smoke a cigarette. And I saw he's a cigarette smoker. So I was like,
where is this? Like, what place are you in the world, right?
In Argentina.
Argentina. Okay.
Yeah, we were at a conference in Argentina. This guy from Gibraltar is there.
Just happens to be there.
Well, but it's a conference for this industry, so it made sense that he was there. And so I buy a pack of cigarettes and I start smoking too. And I'm not a smoker. I hate smoking, but I figured like that would get me closer to this guy. Ultimately, we got him as a customer, and the conversation started with me smoking a cigarette next to him.
That is wild. Okay, can you say what it was?
What domain it was?
Yeah.
I actually don't remember.
You don't remember.
But I can tell you it might have been .design or .group or .blog, one of those.
So one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was I saw it said, I think on your LinkedIn, it said something like hundreds of millions of GMV had been transacted through the site. What was the biggest, highest ticket item you ever sold?
Yeah. So, we swore to secrecy, so I don't want to say it in a public place, but some of them became revealed anyway. So it became revealed that .app sold for north of $100 million.
You were taking 4%?
We were taking 4%, not on that one though.
Okay.
But the bulk of them were in the sort of single digit millions was kind of probably where the average was.
Yeah. And you said something along the lines of, I think, did you have 80% market share?
We did, yeah.
How did that work?
Yeah, so we created this auction, and then immediately several other companies started to do the same thing. And the other folks, they were better known in the industry. We were not known at all in the industry. We were total outsiders. But we had a few things going for us, which is our professionalism, and then we did some branding. So it was called Innovative Auctions, but we sort of gave Deloitte equal branding to us. We called it the Deloitte auction. And really, Deloitte was only our auditor, so we paid them a small fee, but they let us put their brand on it.
For credibility?
Yeah, for credibility. And I think it really helped. And then, my co-founder was a PhD in auction theory. I think that really helped. And then we just had more hustle. We were willing to do whatever it took to get every customer to sign on, and it paid dividends.
Do you have any other stories other than almost flying to Gibraltar that you could tell?
Man, I'm sure there are plenty, but I flew around the world for that one. I did a lot and went through every everything, every way I could to get a customer on board. I actually spent 2 hours with the chief economist at Google, who, I'm not an economist by trade. This chief economist at Google, is obviously a PhD specifically in auctions. Google does a lot of auctions. It's, at the core of their business. And so this guy's really, really smart. But I had a 2-hour meeting with him, right? I had like a 1-hour meeting with him. It stretched into 2 hours. And we eventually convinced him that they should participate in the auction. And it was a big get for us because getting Google on board meant that there was just a credibility stamp. We had Amazon, we had Google, we had Microsoft. We got all the big guys to say that they would only work with us.
How did you do that?
I think we promised them certain things. So as an example, Amazon, in this auction, the seller gets paid. Amazon had this stipulation that said, we don't want that money to ever be used against us. So we don't want somebody to sell us a name and then have more money that they can then use to bid against us in the future. So we said, okay, well, we'll have this escrow service where we'll escrow money. And at any given time, we were escrowing hundreds of millions of dollars. And so we had certain things that it wouldn't be easy for somebody else to do. It kind of gave us
a little bit of an advantage,
a network effect of sorts, that once we had run the first few auctions, they said, okay, well, we can only work with these guys.
That's wild. I'm trying to think. Yeah. So that business ended up also getting sold.
Yes.
What was the process that you went through? Why did that?
So it was sort of, it was sold to another auction company, and it was sort of like a way for me to get out. I really enjoyed making the market, which is what we were doing with the domain auction business. But the company was doing all sorts of other auctions too, like government RFP stuff, selling rough diamonds, selling mining rights, all that kind of stuff. And that was less interesting to me. And we ended up selling the company as a way to exit out. And my co-founder ended up running the company afterwards.
Yeah. Who did you exit to?
Another company you never would have heard of.
Okay. Yeah. So I'd be a little curious. Did you end up going to work for that company afterwards?
I did not.
Or no? No.
I ended up immediately sort of starting full-time investing after that.
Okay. I think your favorite book is Ender's Game.
Yeah, that's right.
Why do you love Ender's Game?
It's just such a good story. It's really well written, and have you read the book?
I've listened to all of them.
Okay. So, it has a twist, and I just think it's such an interesting story. I'm sort of enchanted by it. And it's a science fiction book. I actually haven't read that much other science fiction. I've read the whole series of Ender's Game and other books that Orson Scott Card has written. But there's something about it that just really stuck with me. So question, do you think Ender is a villain?
No.
I don't think so either. But some people do.
Is there like fan lore rabbit holes that you can go down on the internet?
Yeah, there are. If you search for it, you'll be able to go down.
Okay. So I think, was it like in 2020 you created The Pitch?
It was earlier than that. It was 2015.
2015. Okay. Yeah. Why did you create that?
Okay. So I was, I think maybe sold the auction business or I was in the process of ending the auction business. And I was sick at home and I was watching Shark Tank, and I was angel investing at this point. So I was watching Shark Tank and I thought, hey, this is not real at all. Why don't we show something that's real, like a real version of this? So that was the inspiration for the pitch. And the idea was I would just record a podcast of people pitching me and then share my feedback with the audience. And And it evolved over time to become something more like Shark Tank, actually, which is what the audience wanted. But that's how we started. It was in 2015, went pretty well. At the beginning of 2017, Apple reached out to us and said, we would love to feature you. And so they featured us on the top panel of the Apple Podcasts app. And so there, in January 2017, if you had looked at if you opened your podcast app, you would see a picture of me. And that was kind of wild. Like so many people, like people I went to high school with that I wasn't in touch with anymore.
We're texting you.
Yeah, like messaging me in some way like, hey, I see your face. And that was really cool. And because of that, we sort of rose through the ranks in the podcast, most notable, most
chops.
downloaded.
Yeah.
Which actually we did early on too when we launched in July 2015. We also were in the, I think maybe hit number 15 most popular podcast, but that it's not like we had the most downloads. It's rated by recency. So like we were a new podcast and got a ton of downloads because of Product Hunt actually. So we
did you launch on Product Hunt?
We launched on Product Hunt.
Okay.
And Product Hunt was super valuable to us. It was like the right audience for our podcast, and it was super popular at the time. And we were the most popular podcast, most hunted that day. And they had like a weekly newsletter, and we were the number one that week. And they had a monthly one, and I think we were like number 2 that month. So each time we just got more and more downloads, and each time we sort of cracked it in the podcast rankings. But then fast forward to 2017, we end up getting picked up again, and we again get a lot of downloads in this Apple Podcast feature. And then Gimlet Media reaches out to us. They're a podcasting company. They'd raised a bunch of money to run a podcasting network, and they reached out to acquire us. And relatively quickly, within a couple months, we'd closed the deal. And then I think, so that was in February of 2017. And then we were in season, we stopped, and then sort of relaunched under their banner in June of 2017. And then we had a lot more resources. We had a team, we had a studio, all sorts of stuff. And then fast forward a couple of years, and then, so Gimlet gets acquired by Spotify, and ultimately we got canceled by Spotify.
Why do you think that happened?
I think they canceled a lot of the like
original content or whatever.
A lot of the they went after like the big stars, Barack Obama and others like that. They didn't go after the like small fish. I think we were relatively not that important to them. And then I had a co-founder at the time. He ended up buying it out from them and now still runs the pitch. I'm not involved.
Yeah. I would be super curious, like while researching you've done a bunch of very unusual and very interesting things. It's almost like I like the term serendipity maxing. What is your like general philosophy for doing things or, like approaching life?
Yeah. So I just love having unique experiences, and I say yes to a lot of crazy stuff that other people might not say yes to, or I get excited about things that other people might not get excited about. And so that's led to a lot of great stuff. There are a bunch of things. I got married in a Taco Bell sponsored wedding in the metaverse. I was the first guest at Brian Chesky's Airbnb.
Oh, you were the first one?
Actually, as I was saying that, I remembered that I think he had done a dry run before.
Okay. Before posting it?
Before posting it, I think. So I might have been the second one. But I was among the first guests.
Yes.
I think I was the first to book it, is what he said. And
have you done any other things through just this like general, I'll say yes, even if it sounds a little crazy?
Yeah. So I had a series of weddings, all to the same person, to my wife.
Like 6?
Depending on how you count it. It could be as many as 9, but yeah, there are a lot of events. What else? Just say yes. I ended up on a Justin Bieber music video. So it was during the pandemic. Oh, it is actually how I ended up on a Justin Bieber music video is kind of fun too. I was on a dating show during the pandemic called the Zoom Bachelor.
And how did you get on the Zoom Bachelor?
Sort of another series of saying yes to things that led to
a good thing happening.
Which is me being on the Zoom Bachelor. And one of the people watching the show was Scooter Braun, who was at the time Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande's manager. And, you know, we ended up in a clubhouse room together. And he was like, you know, what are you doing after the show? I think he was watching the show while making this music video, sort of on one screen and on another screen. And then he said, you know, I should put you in the video. And I ended up sending a video to him, and then ended up in a Justin Bieber music video. And then that somehow ended up on, there were a bunch of famous people in the video and me. So if you go to the Wikipedia page for this song, which is called Stuck With You, by Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande, you'll see all the people in the video. And I'm the only one that doesn't have a Wikipedia
like 10
page.
million followers. Oh, that's hilarious.
And I did not put myself in the Wikipedia page. Like
it just happened.
It just happened. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, so let's jump to like the Airbnb thing. How did that end up coming together?
So I had actually tweeted at Brian several times, like suggestions for the product. And he actually responded to me. So one of them was an internet speed test. He responded like, that's a great idea. We should do it. And the other one was I gave him some really critical feedback about the pricing and sort of the fees,
like the cleaning fees,
and other stuff and taxes and everything. And I said, you know, I gave him some harsh feedback about how it should be bundled in, because he had posted this Steve Jobs quote about starting with the customer.
And working.
And I said, if you started with the customer, you would not have this kind of pricing. And he said, I think you're right. We'll work on changing that. And I heard from people internally that actually is what got him. I'm of course was not the first person to say it, but I heard from people internally that he was like, yeah, we need to change this. He's right. So I had some banter with Brian already on Twitter. But then he posted that he was gonna start hosting people at his place, but he had not listed his property yet. So I actually just was like, let me find his property. And so I went to Airbnb/user/1, 2, 3, 4, and he was user number 4. And then
you just waited?
I had tweeted it out. I was like, this is his user. And then the listing wasn't there yet. And then I went back to an hour later or sometime later, and boom, the listing was there. And I was the first to book it. I booked it like for a month later, or less than a month later, I think a couple weeks later.
That's wild.
And then stayed at his house. He was amazing. He was an amazing host. He picked up our bags, showed us around the place. You know, we had dinner together, we cooked together, we went out. He was just like an incredible host all around. He was messaging with me throughout, and just phenomenal.
Yeah. And that's awesome. What's the hardest thing you've overcome?
I think like definitely had heavy imposter syndrome. And I think it's mostly gone away, which might mean that like I'm too cocky now. But I think I just realized that no one else fully knows what they're doing either. So we're all figuring it out together in life. And it no longer is like a crippling thing for me.
Did you have any specific experiences where you were like, you had, you know, real imposter syndrome that you can remember?
Nothing in particular. It was just something that was like pervasive for me, that I was thinking about all the time. Like, I don't deserve to be here. I don't know what I'm doing. throughout my life. And then I think really over the past 5 or 6 years, it's gone away.
Okay. Sheel, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was really fun.
Yep.